I probably should have made this months ago when the game came out, almost 3 months. But like I explained in my big return video, I had a lot going on personally. I didn't read back, and I am committed um on a semi-consistent um but we have a bit of an advantage here. Now that Ghost of Yotei has been out for so long, so many people have played it, I get to talk a bit about the spoilery stuff that I would have skipped over if I had done this review. Came out like I did the first. I will say one thing I'm not going to talk about at all is any of the extracurricular Twitter stuff that's been since the game was announced. Talk about how Atsu compares to woman. I'm not going to talk about identity politics being played by people like Asmongold, whoever else likes to complain about female characters in video games, but then still play the video game anyway because they know make good content because people would stream and type hateful stuff in chat, and then that stuff is encouraged and it feeds into a cycle of pessimism. It's just not something that I'm interested in. We're just going to be discussing the game as a game today. Hopefully that is all right with you guys. Now, I usually break these down into talking about story and talking about the, but this time I think I kind of want to go a little. I would like to discuss the atmosphere, so that'll be like a third smaller section. But starting like we always do, I like to talk about the story. First thing that I want to talk about is the difference in Atsu's character arc in comparison to Jin's, because Jin's story is about realizing that the way that he has lived his life isn't enough. What he's learned as a samurai isn't going to save his people because the Mongols just play too dirty. So he's kind of turning his back on everything that he knew beforehand, giving up the life that he used to live for the sake of saving his people. He finds that to be more important than his code of honor. So it's, in effect, killing his former self and coming back as the ghost. But the story in Ghost of Yotei is more about Atsu having to kind of come to grips with the fact that she's no longer alone, that, you know, the family that she mourns so greatly isn't completely gone, and there might have to be something after the mission is over that she has to consider for the first time, and that maybe she's not the only person that has changed. And I do find that kind of interesting. I like watching her heart kind of soften and realize that she is still capable of mercy. The only thing is that the gist of the story is very much like, oh, you know, cycle of vengeance, violence is bad and it destroys you and it never ends, all that stuff. It's a good message, but it's something that Sony's kind of been doing they kind of been running it into the ground. It's what The Last of Us 2 is about, it's what God of War Ragnarok is about, and here it's what Ghost of Yotei is about. So it's like, if it was, and it's always like the sequel, it's the second game in a new they do it in, but I don't know, it feels like maybe if we hadn't seen it done so much, especially coming out of Sony, that it would resonate a bit more. It's not that it's bad, it's just that it just feels like it's nothing new, because it is nothing. No, but with that out of the way, I do think that the game has a major upgrade in terms of the side characters. The network of characters that you interact with is much bigger than last time around. And it's not just merchants, it's, you know, the people that teach you the new weapons and random NPCs that you might meet along the way. Like Hachi, and like learning about the Ainu, she was like one of the most interesting things about the game at large to me. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to keep exploring the open world, because I wanted to keep people learning things. Not even just about the history of Japan, but just learning how the world in this game operates. It's so different than Tsushima. And I don't know how much time was spent working on this game compared to the last one, but I do know that after Tsushima came out, they worked on a couple DLC packs for it, including a paid expansion and like the multiplayer mode and all that stuff. So I don't know how much, if any, more time went into Yotei than first time around. Obviously, they still had a lot of building blocks there that they could work on top of, but I don't know. I think that the approach taken this time around does lend itself more to just having more interesting and engaging side characters. That's kind of the way that I look at it. Now, I would like to address the elephant in the room. I'm kind of just reading off of a page of notes that I wrote. So if I don't necessarily flow from one point to the next too organically, that's kind of why. Also, you should totally subscribe if you're new and if this is your first time watching one of my videos. I do quite a Anyway, the Yotei Six, the main antagonistic force in this, I want to talk about them for a little bit because it's ambitious to say it right at the very beginning. There's 6 main villains. Oh, there's 6 people on Atsu's hit list. Is to get revenge on 6 people for what they did. And you kind of wonder, like, how are you gonna give each of these villains enough time to shine to make them interesting and to make you engage with Atsu's personal motivations to kill each of them? Because, like, Lord Saito, obviously, because she led him right to her door, and that's how all this stuff happened in the first place. But, like, the Oni, I don't know, it just doesn't necessarily feel like the motivation and the connection is there, especially when you realize that the game starts with you killing one. You start by having already hunted down the snake and found where he likes to drink, and it opens with a boss fight against him, and you kill him, and then it's already one of the 6 main enemies gone. And despite this being a video game that can really go on as long as the developers and the player wants it to, there's still just not necessarily enough time divided up against the remaining 5. Saito gets a lot, not quite as much as I would like him to. The Kitsune gets the absolute most. And the spider gets like a good bit, but the Oni and the dragon, and obviously the snake, they just don't get enough. You know, it's just a little disappointing because there's not necessarily a reason that it's such an unevenly sliced pie chart, I suppose. It could have just been 6 equal slices, but it's really not for some. It feels like 50% of it Tsune, 25% of Saito, and then most of them have to 25. And I don't know, I just think that it could have been divided up a little bit better. Or maybe we just reduce the number. It could be the Yotei 4 instead of the 6, because Spider and Dragon get the absolute least characterization. Absolutely. I don't even think I recall Dragon saying anything. His main contribution to the story is being the son of Lord Saito and the brother of the Spider. If it weren't for being connected to those other 2 members of the Yotei Six, there'd be pretty much nothing to do. And it's not like the Oni gets a whole lot either. He's just like, it's weird because he pretty much dominates a portion of the map, the Chikari Plain. That pretty much belongs to him. Fight Oni raiders there. So he monopolizes that portion of the map, and you only see him, what, 2 times before you kill him? I don't know, it's just, it doesn't do everything I need in that room. It feels as though the scale was just a bit for what they were trying to accomplish. But that happens sometimes. Now, I did mention Saito getting 25% of the pie. That's mostly to say that, like, for him being the big bad, like the final boss of the game, I don't really feel like you get enough time with him either. And this is something that I also kind of felt with Odin in God of War Ragnarok. Even though the focal character shifts to Atreus so that you can spend time with Odin, I just don't think that there's enough. I think that that's the same thing here with Lord Saito, because, you know, like, you know, he's got a bone to pick with the Shogun, and he's trying to, like, raise his own army. He can overthrow the Shogun and take over, be a new type of samurai lord. But that's really it, because again, outside of flashbacks, you don't see him too much before you fight him. There's like, you have a mini boss encounter with him, like midway through the game, depending on when you want to go do that part. But you don't see him much until the game's. I think that's just a little. It just leaves a little bit to be desired. I will say though, the twist with Uni being the original Kitsune from that night did not exactly catch me by surprise. The more you work with her, the more of those quests that you do tracking the Kitsune, it's like she knows a little bit too. She must have been part of the group or worked very closely with them. Find out that she was the original Kitsune, and it forces Atsu to accept the possibility that, you know, he's not the only person that's changed since that night. And it's cool, it works. I do think that it works. I do like Uni as a character, she's great. But I don't know, I just feel like it's in service of, like I said before, a bit of an overdone plotline. And that's not to say that I didn't enjoy the story. I obviously did. But pound for pound, I do think the first game story is a little bit. Now, I will say that in comparison to like Abby or even Ellie or Kratos, who were characters before that would give on their quest for revenge, I think Atsu is a little bit more personally relatable, just for the simple fact that like the reason that she was doing all this in the first place was because she had lost her family that night, but she finds out, you know, almost halfway through the game that Jubei is still alive. And she finds out much later on that she has a niece. And that's when she really starts having to consider a life after the quest is over. And I do like that, because I'm kind of a sucker for characters who start out completely devoted to their obsession and haven't given a single ounce of thought as to what comes next. Being forced to reconcile that line of, like, hey, I'm not going to let you throw your life away. You have to tell me, you have to come up with something that you're going to do after this. I think that always works for me, and it worked for me here too. The one last thing I want to say, oh my god, one last thing I want to say about the story before I move on to play. Yubei's death hit me. Like, I mostly play single player narrative games, and so like I'm used to there being emotional moments that try to tug at your heartstring. I would say in the last 10 years, it's been like Jubei's death, Brock's death, Aunt May's death, all Sony, and I don't know, like, I mean, what came out in 2015? I don't know, like those are like the holy trinity of actually moved me on an emotional level. Not just because it's like a death that you don't see coming, because sometimes you do see it coming. I think in the cases of Aunt May and Brock, it's telegraphed pretty well. But just for what it means for your character's development and the impact that it'll have, those are kind of why those moments. But that's all I would like to say about the story for now. Move on to the gameplay mechanics. The one big difference, in the first game, you only had one weapon, Katana, and the thing that would change was your style, or stance rather. You would use different stances to get through different enemies' weapons. That same sort of rock, paper, scissors mechanic is present in this game, but instead of switching stances, you're switching weapons. It solves the same function, or serves the same function. It doesn't change too much gameplay-wise, but it is more visually striking and dynamic to switch between a Kusarigama and a Katana, spear and an Odachi, like, on the fly, mid-combat, to handle different situations. And it does kind of make you feel like you have more agency and can more directly control the flow of battle by taking a more offensive approach. And that I greatly appreciate. I do like that sense of freedom, even if it is artificial. It encouraged me, at least, to play more aggressive. Last time I kind of played a lot of defense, especially in boss fights. This time, even in boss fights, I went on the attack most of the time. And I think that works for the type of character that Atsu is. She seeks to destroy, where Jin seeks to protect. So I think it works. If that was the intention, very well played by them. And like I said, having different weapons means having different weapon masters, and having different weapon masters gives you more side quests to complete, and it also gives you more characters to interact with in your wide web, and I find that to be interesting too. It gives even further levels of customization. You can color match pretty much all your weapons to your armor set. I typically wore an armor that would match whatever environment that I was in. So if I was in Teshio Ridge where it's snowy, I would wear my white and blue armor. If I was in Oshima Coast, I would wear my purple and gold armor because it's very floral and colorful there. Stuff like that. That was my philosophy. So I enjoyed being able to tailor each of my weapon kits to fit that same aesthetic. And something else that you get with that is now there's multiple loadouts that you can save and switch between in the menu. So, you know, if you're trying to be stealthier, you can switch to your Ninetales armor. Or if you want to be tougher, you can switch to like your Dragonfly armor. Or sorry, not Dragonfly armor. Is it Dragonfly armor? I think I was thinking of Spider Lily armor, but I think that those are both in the game. You know, and I won't say that I necessarily felt a huge tangible difference in your stats from one armor set to the next. It is still Ghost of Fashion. But I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, because, you know, once you master the game's mechanics, you kind of minimize the amount of damage in open combat scenario anyway. So I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea. Now, I did, just a second ago, touch on stealth. I want to circle back to that. I think, just like Spider-Man 2, that the stealth is far improved in this game, because so there's an encounter pretty early in the game where you're trying to break in like Saito's castle, and I was kind of banging my head against it for a while because I definitely was undersold, and my approach from previous game was to just like get into open combat and try to pick off as many as I can. That wasn't working, so I slowed down. I planned my route with the information that I already had. I picked my targets more carefully, and I was able to stealth my way through an encounter that I definitely was not strong enough to force my way through. And to that end, I definitely feel like your capacity for stealth, your freedom in that aspect of the game is vastly expanded. And I appreciate that as someone that grew up playing a lot of stealth games. You know, Ubisoft doesn't want to give us any more Splinter Cell games. Assassin's Creed isn't really so much about stealth anymore. So it's nice to have something. You also get guns in this game, which is kind of crazy, because that was like one of the main reasons I wanted to play, is you get a rifle, but you also get a pistol. So having the rifle on top of having two kind of gives you, like, in conjunction with the bombs that they also give you access to, it gives you faster options in combat, I feel like, because you'll be facing like firing squads. You don't necessarily have time to draw up a shot with a bow. So you can pull out your rifle, quick fire somebody, and chuck a bomb in there. And I feel like that gives you more freedom too. The pistol, when you combine it with the other types of like quick fire tools, like your smoke bombs, or not smoke bombs, but like the whatever, like the, I can't remember what it's called, the Fushigi Mitsubishi. You throw it in the person's face and it temporarily distracts them. You use that in conjunction with the gun or the kunai or whatever. It gives you a lot of options close quarters combat too, if you do find yourself being overwhelmed, outnumbered, something like that, and you're on low health and you're dead. And so I enjoy that. Speaking of being low health, there's a new mechanic in this game as well, in the form of wolf dens, where you'll encounter a wolf and he will lead you to some other wolves that have been held captive by enemies in the game, and you free the wolves, and then if you get into a combat encounter in that general area, you'll either have a wolf pop up to help you with the standoff, and you'll take out 2 enemies at the beginning, and then they'll stay with you to help you with the rest of the combat encounter, or if you find yourself downed, instead of having to spend any resolve to get back up, wolf will come and save you. And I think that happens if you're out of resolve. I can't exactly remember. It's been pretty close to 2 months since I've played the game. So I think that's how it works, but I'm not entirely 100% sure. Do not quote me on that. I will deny it in the court of law. But yeah, and I guess one more thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to the gameplay changes is now there's a camping mechanic. You can set up camp and like rest to recover your resolve. You can cook yourself a meal to get its temporary buff. I didn't typically find myself engaged much. I would kind of just when I realized I was on resolve, which I'm sure is like what you're saying. I didn't care too much for cooking. Mostly because like I found the cooking mini game to be kind of fun, kind of charming at first. And then I got sick of it. And then you just stop having it. And then I was like, well, now I just don't feel like I have as much control over what's happening in the game. But the other thing that it's useful for is you can select a merchant whether you need to talk to the bow maker or you talk to Paro or whoever. You can pretty much like select them in the Wolfpack portion of the app menu screen type thing, and then set up camp, and they'll pretty much spawn at your camp and deal with them direct, rather than having to go way to another part of the map and then back to where you just were. That part's nice, I guess, but like when I'm just like post defeating Saito, I didn't find myself engaging with it too much. Now, I do want to talk about boss mechanics, or yeah, the boss fight encounters very briefly because I did mention them earlier. They are largely unchanged from the previous game. Like when you're fighting Koton Khan, you'll have to switch stances based on what, and that still holds true when you're fighting Lord Saito. You have to switch weapons depending on what he's using. It doesn't necessarily make you feel like you are free to use what you've learned to your advantage in this particular fight. It feels more like the game is telling you exactly what to do right now for the next 30 seconds of this fight. And I've never really been too much of a fan of that. It's the same reason I don't like color-coded enemies like in DMC Devil May Cry or in God of War 2018. Like, I can understand something being more effective, but let me still play it the way that I want to play it. Like, I still would have preferred just a proper duel with Saito at the end, you know? But that's just me. That's just a gripe that I have. I don't think anybody else is going to really be complaining too much about that, especially because everybody put their reviews out 2 months ago. But that's all I really want to say about the gameplay here this time around. Now I would like to talk about the atmosphere, because I have never found myself so engaged by a game's open world. I would play for like 8 hours at a time and not do a single main story quest because I'm doing weapon master quests, or I'm helping out the cartographer, or I'm helping out the Ainu with something or something like that. Like I would just be writing, and then I'd find like a bounty board where I'd find somebody who needed help, and then boom, I'm doing a bounty hunt, or I'm doing a quest, or I'm doing something else. And then like that cycle would just keep feeding itself. And you would see on Twitter there was like a trend going around of people showing like how many hours they had put into the game versus how many members of the Yotei Six that they had killed. And for the longest time, I had killed like the snake and the kitsune, and then next thing you know, I'm like 30 hours into the game and I'm still only at 2 out of 6. I found that very interesting, because that means that it's an open world done very well. Now the interactables and the collectibles are pretty much the same as they were last time. Like the fox dens are the exact same, bamboo strikes are the exact same, the hot springs are the exact same. Not that that's a bad thing in the slightest, because that's the kind of stuff people like to engage with, especially the bamboo strikes, because it's like a skill check. And the more of them you do, the fewer of them there are in the map, and that's kind of sad, because you're like, well, I gotta look up a guide as to where they are so I can see if I still have any left. Obviously, people are going to say there's no such thing as too many bamboo strikes. I agree with that. But there are some new things here, like I did mention the wolf dens. There's also, instead of having a flute that you learn songs for, it's a shamisen. You don't do haikus anymore, you do calligraphy painting of landscapes. And like, it serves the same purpose, but it is a little bit different. But it can kind of feel like the Spider-Man or God of War games, where like, if you did go through the story at a regular pace, or even a slightly expedited pace, there's just a lot of that kind of stuff left to do. like, you know, you have to pray at the altars and you have to climb these shrines and stuff. It does feel like a chore list whenever you finish this. There's still going to be plenty of that stuff left to do. Like, I want to say it took me close to like 55 hours to actually get to credits at that, or on that game. There's still so many like, bounty hunts and all sorts of other stuff to do. It does kind of feel like a collectathon. And that's just kind of the price to pay with these open world games these days. Something that never really goes away. But that being said, another thing that works the same way is the dye kits for your armor and weapons and stuff like that. That works the same. Go to a dye house, you buy certain colors. One thing that is different from this game compared to the last one is visual distinction between different regions. You pretty much know just by looking. You could identify the rolling flower fields of Oshima Coast and the barren grassland of Prairie Plain and the snowy wilderness of Teshio Ridge. You can see Mount Yotei when you're Mount Yotei. You can tell just by looking around where you are. And I found that really interesting. There's also different types of enemies depending on where you are on the map. Like, you're usually fighting Saito outlaws. Those are like the default, like, Mongols of old, where in the first game you're only fighting Mongols. Here you're fighting the Saito outlaws. You're fighting the Oni raiders who specifically work for him, and they fight differently. So they use a lot of fire, and they use attack dogs. And then when you go further north to Teshio Ridge, you'll be dealing with the Ninetales who work for the Kitsune, and so they use stealth and they use long-range weapons, stuff like that. There's variety in enemy types based on where in the map you are, and I love that. I will always prefer variety in enemy types over any other alternative. It feels like there's more of an intrinsic reason to continue exploring different regions and different locations, and I love that. The puzzle solving in this game, very simple. It is very, very simple. Especially because it tells you when you need to refer back to the cipher that it gave you earlier in the game. So you don't even necessarily need to think too much. It's like, oh, I need to look at this right now for some reason. Okay, cool. So I turn this to the left, and then boom, I'm through the door. It's that kind of stuff. Which is, I mean, it's fun. Now, gracious. About the general atmosphere of the game, like the art direction and the music. One thing that I do love is the Watanabe mode, where is it Shunshiro Watanabe, who did Lazarus and Samurai Champloo and Cowboy Bebop. I think he composed some music for the game. So when you turn that mode on, it gives you this nice like lo-fi beat loop that you get to listen to, and it's so immersive for me. It just had me like wandering the map, pretty much just looking for stuff to do to keep me engaged in the game. Not in a bad way, not like, oh, there's nothing in the open world to do. It's just like it keeps you wanting to stay in it so that the experience can continue. And then the lo-fi fades out when you go into a combat encounter, and then how do you know that the combat encounter is over? The lo-fi fades back in. I think that's great. It's not even something that was like necessary. You wouldn't miss it if it wasn't there, but it being there does show that they had their priorities in the right place enough to where like they nailed so many crucial things about the game that they had enough spare time to add something, and that's important to me. Another thing is, I mentioned bounty hunts. When you go to the bounty board to pick up a new poster to go track down a target, there will also be a poster of you, Onryo. And as your legend as the Onryo grows, the bounty gets higher, and bounty hunters will do more to try to catch you off guard. They'll set traps, which sometimes if you're not paying attention, you can oopsie right into, and I think that that's fun, because you're both the hunter and the hunted. But I wish, because the game allows you to take your bounty poster down, I wish that did something. I don't know, I wish it like... I wish it would either give you like some temporary anonymity, or it would like bring down your wanted level or something like that, just in case you're in like, you know, a really high difficulty area and you don't want to just be ambushed by bounty hunters. You should be able to like tear down your poster like in an Assassin's Creed game, be pretty much invisible to bounty hunters for the next like 30 like 30 real life minutes. That's it. That's all. But I don't know. Overall, I think that this game is a perfectly worthy successor to Ghost of Tsushima, and I probably see Sucker Punch doing one more of these. I don't know where it would take place. I don't really know what they would do creatively to set itself apart from the first two games, but I would absolutely be there. They have also talked about going back. Oh my god! They've also talked about going back to Sly Cooper, and I would absolutely be down for that as well. They have said that they're not revisiting it. That sucks, but hey, I'll take it. Um, but as far as this game, this game on its own, I'd give it an easy 8 out of 10. Maybe even up to a 9. Good day. I think that nothing that I can say negatively about this game goes deeper than a pick, and I think that's a pretty good place to be for a game that is $70 and took 5 years to come out. You know what I mean? So with all that being said, curious to know what you thought about Ghost of Yotei, what your favorite part of it was, where you think it could have been better, and how you think it compares to the first game. And let me know what game you want to see next. I do need to get around to talking about Dispatch. But all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. I'll see you very soon.